RB551. No wonder he got blasted. He's one of those older models programmed by a central computer. Not us. We're independent thinkers. Roger, 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 roger.
All right, for those of you who watched the Roderick Graham, let's call it discussion, where I ended up having to explain to that individual why he was racist in his beliefs. And now, since a black man got exposed for being racist, we need to have a bunch of neoliberals step up and try to come to his defense. So one of those ones said, let's talk to us. So let's do it. Alrighty, can you see me?
Not yet.
Good.
There you are. Oh, what a high quality camera you have.
I can't give away secrets like that.
No, I wasn't asking which one it was. Just taking note. How's it going, dude?
It is not bad. I've been running around doing a bunch of home remodeling, so I'm getting settled here. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. So you say, does it record automatically?
Yeah, I'm setting it right now.
Do I have to set something up, do you know?
Nope, it just comes right into the chat as it will have a side by side in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
In the chat, you'll get a download link, and it will have a side by side with both audios. It's the only one I know that does it that easily. So you can see at the top it says it's recording.
Yeah.
So as long as that's up, then it's recording, and then it's backed up. It's not like we can mess it up.
Quality.
So pretty cool. All right.
Cool.
Anyway, so I don't know where you want to start off. I know all I really know is you had some issues with my discussion with Roderick Graham, and I think you'll just really have to take it from there. One thing I would like to know is what experiences and what education or something do you have that would honestly make your opinion something that other people should care about?
Cool. Yeah. Also, just want to say I am somewhat familiar with who you are. Like, I saw you on Joe Rogan when that happened, and I was a fan of the conversation you guys had there. I thought you were spitting some important stuff, advocating for community policing, and like sharing a lot of information that people outside of police departments don't have, and I thought that was valuable. So I want to put that out there.
Well, thanks.
Good faith. Good
Cool.
faith discussion.
I want to say I greatly appreciate that. I'm not doing anything differently now, even though it may sound that way. I feel like a lot of the environment around me has changed. And for a super instance we were talking about in that podcast, I'm talking a lot about systemic issues. And that essentially means that policing as an institution has racial problems. And it does. But that doesn't mean cops are racist. And once it got to this rhetoric that like all cops are racist and stuff, that is not what I was doing in Baltimore. That is not what the Baltimore movement was. The Baltimore stuff was about reforms and making police better and better servants, not to get rid of them and treat them all as racist. And I think that has been a very bad line that the left has taken and kind of ruined potential progress.
See, okay, that's helpful for me as well. I can tell we're already about to get into discussion, so let me state what you asked for first. I'm a PhD student in philosophy at the CUNY Graduate Center. Okay. I specialize in ethics and epistemology. Cool. Moral, social, political philosophy is like my main thing. Professor I work with most is Charles Mills. You might be familiar with, some not, but some people watching might be familiar with his book, The Racial Contract. It was kind of taken up pretty significantly mostly in like history and sociology when it was published, even though he's a philosopher and it was published as a philosophy text. He's I think a really important thinker, and he's become very influential and is now getting the recognition that I think he deserves. But his work is pretty squarely in racial justice tradition, I guess, Black radical tradition. inspired by Marxist critiques of capitalism and power, but advocates for now what he calls a black radical liberalism. Actually have his book right here, the most recent one, Black Rights, White Wrongs, plug that for everyone, where he discusses black radical liberalism, which I think is important because I think often on the left you see people using liberal as a pejorative, and there's a sense in which I understand that, and they're really probably just talking about like people like Joe Biden, you know, moderate Democrats, and I get that there are reasons to be upset with those people for, you know, not following through on certain promises that they've made that are more progressive. But I think liberalism as a political philosophy, you know, focus on the freedom of the individual, rights, and, you know, the ideal of equal treatment under the law is incredibly important. So I confess to not being a commie there.
Good. To set the ground base for you, the first half of my dissertation is me realizing that I needed to have a solid worldview to even approach these police issues. And so I evolved a more modern version for neo-Kantian constructivism, and that's certainly what I am.
You're a Kantian as well. Okay,
yeah, that is,
brother.
Great. So that's definitely my worldview. I've evolved into a neo-Kantian constructivist worldview, a little bit of modifications for modern purposes. I would say that if you go by like classic liberal individual rights things you said, clearly a liberal, and I don't subscribe to this whole left-right. I'm back when Rage Against the Machine knew that the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans, were both evil things against the common man. And you know, this age of rage on behalf of the machine has been staggeringly confusing for me.
Got you. Okay. So good to know. So what did you do your dissertation in?
So my degree is in business management because the problems I saw in policing I realized were managerial issues. So the study I did was going over all these police commanders. I had access to the academy. And when they go to the academy, police officers, we have data that shows they enter in with a greater sense of morality than when they leave the police academy, even though they're giving training that we know is effective in other situations. And I wanted to figure out why this was. And a surprising result that I got to doing a thematic analysis and read between the lines was that there's a massive confusion upon ethics, which we're going to hit to now, which is the mixing of communal or organizational ethics with individual ethics. And an example of this is police and the public will use these terms interchangeably, though they are extremely different. You know, it's like saying you're religious and then not clarifying whether you're for Satan or Jesus. Like these things, they require serious going throughs. So, like legally, a police officer can kill somebody based upon their individual moral ethics, what they thought, what they believed. At the same time, we are all expecting that they will get the outcomes that we want because they will follow the ethical and moral imperatives that we establish as a community, and that they wouldn't follow their own morals.
In the sense that, like, if they legitimately claim to be in fear of their life, was that what you're talking about?
Well, you don't have to be legitimately, like, the fear doesn't have to be manifested in something objective. It can just be psychological. It's literally
right. No, I mean, but they just have to claim to be in genuinely, like, to them subjectively in fear of their life.
Right, and I would argue for more objective morals that are established by the community through communal ethics, and then the officers would have to subscribe to that. But like departmental policies are written in communal ethics ideas that there's like a continuum of force. You do this, you do that, and you do this. And that means that's what the officer should follow, whether he believes in it or not. So that's the community's ethics and the organization's ethics. And as an employee, I think it's clear that that's what you should be following, especially when you are a servant. The big problem I think that really comes in with this concept is that means when the officer follows what the community told him to do, that blame is entirely on the community, not the officer, but we can't get past the vengeance mindset.
Interesting. Yeah, so I mean, as you said, these departmental policies are written in terms of values that are, you know, traditionally supposed to appeal to the many, or like, you know, that are founding with our country, liberalism, you know, uh, these sort of classic ideas that are communitarian in some sense, but the fact that the community has no involvement and cannot hold the officer accountable creates a serious problem, right? Because then the interpretation of the text,
The officer isn't accountable. The officer is a pawn.
right?
It
Exactly.
shouldn't be. I'm saying he shouldn't be accountable. Really, it's not. For like, if you take the modern case with Derek Chauvin, the training, the commanders, the sergeants, the long
Right.
history, that is who is telling him to do this. He's just a product, and to focus on him greatly misses everything that we were supposed to be trying to do.
Okay, interesting. Okay. So I wanted to start with talking about what you said with the conflation of calling individual officers racist versus calling policing as an institution racist. So this is something that I've also seen. I've seen it particularly since the rise of Robin DiAngelo, that she will like talk about systemic racism and sometimes seem to attribute systemic racism somehow to an individual, and at least that's how a lot of people misinterpret her, if we're going to be super charitable, right, and say that she's not actually saying that. But what she at least is saying is that and this is a more defensible claim, is that the individuals are complicit in a racist system. But then she seemingly carries over, therefore we're all racist. So she sort of does this little sleight of hand that, because the conventional sense in which an individual can said to be a racist is that they have the belief in the superiority of one race over another, or
I
that
disagree
they.
with that, but okay.
I mean, that's at least one. I mean,
Sure.
what would you have in mind?
I mean, I would just go by the Civil Rights Act. It's classifying people into a race and then treating them differently than another group.
Okay, so just discrimination based on race.
I mean,
Or
I mean
double
that's the
standard.
federal definition. That's the state definition. That's
Well,
Martin Luther
do they-
King's definition. That's Malcolm X's definition.
I don't know
Webster's.
I don't know about. No, I don't know. Actually, not all dictionaries define it the same way. Some dictionaries do give the one that I gave, but
I mean, that's supremacy. Yeah, that's belief that
Sure.
your race is better. To just generally stereotype everybody is certainly a less extreme form of racism.
Sure. Okay. So yeah. So good. So I was thinking about what should my terms be for this discussion, because there's so many different frameworks, and just for the sake of simplicity and clarity, I figured I should should have in mind, okay, what is racism here? What is race? What are all these things? So I'm going with the framework laid out by the Fields sisters, Barbara and Karen Fields.
Don't care about appeal to authorities. Make whatever you want.
I'm just telling. I'm just telling you.
I think whatever definition you establish is equally valid.
So for them, they actually do go with the same kind of definition you have for racism, and that's a double standard based on race, and that's put in. So racism, they say, is an action, right? It's treating someone according to a race-based double standard. It's not a belief. They don't think it's not. It's not hate.
Okay.
It's not a feeling. It's
So
something
they're only
that
the
done.
action.
Well, they say also then it could be that if you rationalize an action after the fact in this way, then that could count too. But I mean,
okay. A little ambiguous in my terms.
for our purposes, yeah, either's fine there. So, but yeah, the point being just that Robin DiAngelo is in saying, everyone's complicit in this structure of racism or systemic racism, therefore everyone's racist. Definitely leaves most people who have this conventional sense of racism in mind with a bad taste in their mouth. And I think it's not productive. But I do think that is different from what a lot of people are saying when they say, all cops are bastards, right? They're not necessarily saying that cops are racist or anything. Some people I've seen make a nuanced take, and they say, no, all cops are bastards, not in not when they're walking around, not when they're hanging out with their family, but they're bastardized in being cops because this is a bastard system. Just being a cop bastardizes you in some sense.
Yeah, extreme view.
Sure. So what does that sound like a more reasonable thing to you than some of the stuff you've been hearing?
Yeah. I feel like I don't know how we can deviate from the Civil Rights Act and the definitions that it establishes, which aren't far from that's fine. I feel like those definitions are a little ambiguous, but if we're going to talk about race, I hope you're going to agree that race is a social construct that came about in like the 30s
Right.
or 40s.
The 30s or 40s, I think, is not exactly right. I think that's when whiteness became especially important. But race as a social construct, I mean, there's a lot of different views about this. People debate it. Some people argue that, you have basically all the necessary ingredients of racial thinking back in the ancient world with something like Aristotle's theory of natural slavery.
Way over my head.
Okay. Okay. So people argue, put it in different places, but I think when we talk about the modern conception of race, it was pioneered by biologists, I think geneticists, around I think the 18th century is when it started to really take off. Immanuel Kant and right before him David Hume were big on racial categorizations. But in terms of like U.S. ideology has very particular story of race and how it was created. But yeah, it's a social construct for sure.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe just like as far as you remember, I don't know if you went back and watched the conversation. How do you think your conversation with Rod started to slip in the direction of you perceiving him as a racist?
Because, once you classify people into races, especially even when they don't want to be classified into that race, which is another level of racism, and you start treating people differently, that fits the definition of racism, by all means.
Okay. So
to be anti-racist is to be racist.
Right, when you're using the word anti-racist in the popular sense now is what you mean?
Right. The only true way to be anti-racist is to end the social construct.
Okay, but you could.
There's no way for the construct to exist without racism. It's impossible.
Okay, so
if you want to end racism, end the construct.
So sure, but I mean, the problem
there's
with
no
that
way around that,
from
brother.
Like
end the construct and you end racism.
The problem from a legal point of view, in terms of taking this as a solution, is that you can't get into people's brains and turn their concepts off.
You will eventually, because they don't know these concepts unless they're taught them.
And
I understand it's long term, but they have to be taught just as much as they have to be untaught, sure.
Right. But, the fact that it is a long-term project means that for now we're stuck with the concepts, right?
No.
For now,
no.
Right? We should stop teaching them to people starting now, but the people who have them, wired into their social thinking.
I had it wired into my social thinking. I broke out of it.
So you claiming you don't see race? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I understand what race is, but it's not real. I'm smart enough to be able to read a book and know that it's not real. I can understand what DNA is, and I know it's not real.
Right. And I know it's not real as well. But so race not being real doesn't mean that there aren't still racialized groups.
Of course there are. But to end the racialization is to end the concept of racism. You will never end sexism because it's not a social construct. Any social construct that is halting your progress and is stopping justice and equality in this world just needs to be killed off.
Okay, so...
And so what most people have a problem with me is I don't see the world racially. So when a black man like Rod is being a racist, I'm going to call him a racist to his face as fast as anyone else.
So I'm confused because, so I have two quotes written down from the conversation with you and Rod. And so one of them, the first one that I wrote down was, you said, I don't have anything in common with another person just because they're white, literally zero. You don't get to group me in with people that I disassociate with.
Yep.
So that's goes with what you just said. The other one was, there was no concept of race until black people in Africa sold black people to America. The concept didn't exist before then.
True.
So I mean, so there you're evoking the concept.
Yeah,
You're
I
saying,
understand that I'm having a discussion about it, and I can't have a discussion with you right now if I just totally avoid those words.
okay, and I think so. I understand that, right? And I take that charitably, and I think the way to see how Rod is talking about race is to do that and sort of just
I'm fine
apply
with an
it at
intellectual
a larger
discussion, but if
scale.
you're converting that to policy and to actions, like as you define, the actions are racist. Rod is promoting racist actions. It's your definition, not mine.
So racist actions because
He is
they're
promoting to group people racially and then to treat them discriminately. Yes. He's very clear about it.
but what if he's not doing that? What if he's saying, look, this is a racialized group. They experienced this oppression in the past based on the illusion of
What
race.
group, man? What group? This is where, see, we're going to break down in the same frustrations that I'm going to have because you're saying this racialized group. And the only way to name that group is for you to take an authoritative position and label those people. And you don't fucking have that authority.
How do you mean?
Because what group are you talking about? How are you
So
identifying this group? The only way
let's
to identify this group is to take your preconceived biases and you group them into a group and then say they are different. Go ahead and demonstrate otherwise.
no, all you have to do is to look at who was treated differently by the
Right,
people
and
in
you
the past.
can never use a social construct to measure those people. You must use objective measurements. That's why I vehemently, how do you even say that
Right.
word? Vehemently, but you're using a social construct. You cannot. If someone is treated differently, you must point to an actual action. You must say, these people were lead poisoned. These people were had this happen. These people were sold into slavery. These people were this. And that's not every black people. A significant amount of the black people in this country that you're going to group sold the goddamn slaves.
Well, I mean, they of course they
Right,
themselves
a
didn't
black
sell
man
any
from
slaves.
Nigeria whose grandfather sold slaves, your classification will say he can come here and be treated in in discriminately favorable fashion to end what happened to 40,000 people, 100 and what,
Okay,
200 years ago or whatever. It's silly.
so
It's
so
silly.
so if that's your point, then I understand that. If your objection is that, look, if we make affirmative action type policies based on something like whether somebody is black, then we're
Any
going
social
to
construct.
then we're but we're sticking with race. Then there's going to be people, say wealthy Nigerian immigrants who benefit even though they weren't harmed by any of the racist oppression that went on in America. Is that your idea?
They're literally the creators. They're head of it. So yeah, I
Well,
mean that's one aspect. But you're
I
going
mean,
to
it sounds like I don't think it's fair to accuse them of like being. It kind of sounds like you have this
slavery,
idea
the
that,
unique, hold on, bro. The unique thing about Western civilization and America itself is that we're the only place that fought hard to end slavery. That's what's unique about us. It existed before us, it existed after us. There are more African slaves today than there were during the time that we had them.
yeah, but also
So those people you're allowing to come over this country and give discriminate benefits to, while at these things, there's not an infinite amount of these benefits. You're literally taking from innocent people. And I'm sorry, like I can't understand how you can look someone straight in the eye and actually say those things.
well, I didn't say any of those things. Just to
Anyone,
be
you
clear.
plural.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is, so let's just address them in
Mhm.
order. So it sounds like the way that you're talking about this, it sounds like you think that the African slave traders who sold other Africans into
Mhm.
slavery were were sort of like conspiring or something to
At least.
but so you claimed that there actually was a concept of race operative when that sale was happening, but that's not the case. These African people did not think of themselves as black. They didn't even think of themselves as Africans.
So what?
So I mean, that's just one thing to point out.
I'm just saying they did it. We're talking about actions, not social constructs. So
they sold other people into slavery. That's true.
Right, and then to act like the person who buys a hamburger is more responsible than the person who made the hamburger is silly.
Well, but that's to erase all the rest of the history of everything that happened once they got onto the continent, right? So
no, it's not. No, it's not. It's to say that when you do these policies, as you said, you will be benefiting people because your classification is not accurate and not scientific and not objective. You will literally be giving benefits to those who are the least worthy of the benefits, while you're taking from people who are innocent.
If your point is just that affirmative action type policies, if they can be justified, need to be based on ancestry rather than a social construct like race, then I understand that.
It has to be objective. Whatever you're talking about must be objective. And there's no way for anyone to just, what are you going to make them have DNA tests? You can't. Hold on. Most people would not be able to tell an Aboriginal from somebody from Mongolia, from somebody from Kenya, from somebody from Egypt, from somebody from Chad. Most people would not be able to tell you that those were all entirely different lineages.
I got that. Yeah. That's the race.
They would say they're all black. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So, yes. So if your critique here, if your point is just that when we talk about black Americans and historic oppression, we need to be more nuanced, right? We need to talk about American descendants of slaves. We need to talk about African Americans. But even
then, it sounds rough, but so what? Like, this happened to everybody. We're not talking about all the
Slav. It didn't happen to everybody.
Oh, yeah, it certainly did. So black people in America had Black people in America had slaves. Native Americans in America had slaves. The Russians enslaved the Slavs, and then the Slavs are going to come over here after being enslaved by Russia, and you're going to take from them to give to somebody from Africa. It's kind of mind-blowing. Slavery has existed everywhere.
Do you think all slavery is equal?
I have no idea what that would mean.
Do you think all slavery is just as bad everywhere as it shows up? There's not more and less brutal systems of slavery, more and less oppressive, more and less dehumanizing?
If you want to do that, that's fine, but you would have to say that 40,000 people being ripped from their homeland is tragic, but to end up in the most profitable, safest, most opportunity country in the history of the world, and where white people went and sacrificed their sons and daughters to give you freedom, I think you got the fairest deal of anyone.
Well, who are you talking about? Are you talking about the people who were stolen from Africa? Or are you talking
the slaves who came here from Africa.
Well, so those 40,000 did not experience the most profitable country in the world.
No, they ended up there. So no. Listen to what I say.
They died long before.
Sam, the people who are here now, they were on the best path, right? Would you rather have been a slave who was sold to be in Russia? Or Brazil? 4.5 million slaves to Brazil, 400,000 to America. Would you rather have went to Brazil or America?
I'm not sure.
Brazil didn't fight to end slavery. America did.
Well, part of America did.
The half that won, bro. That's who's left. The other people lost and are gone. That country lost.
They're not gone. No. Actually, if you look at the history, what happened after the war? Do you think that you can say that there's a clean split, and then after the Civil War,
literally
the people who wanted to hold on to slaves were not at all like reactionary and holding on to their ideology and lynching people?
For a time period at the time, of course. Do you know just as many white people were lynched as black people?
Just as many?
Just as many.
People who were not seen as white at the time.
No. Literal white people, just as many.
There is no literal white people. That's your whole point.
No, by your saying, so the people that were here, the non-slaves, let's say this, non-slaves with really light skin were, actually, there's more, but I'm just going to give you just as even as an approximation, lynched just as much as black people were.
I mean, I need a citation to take your
You
word
can
on.
look it up, man. Just hit it and do it yourself. I don't want anybody to rely on me. You can look for yourselves.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, I get offended there because you were pretending to know something that you did not know.
well, I don't claim to know it. I'm just skeptical of it. I'm
I'm just
suspending
talking
judgment.
about. That's why I talk about now. I don't know the history, and you don't know the history. There are certain key points that we're aware of, but like certain things, like the idea that you're going to group all of these people in Brazil or somebody else that come here in the same group as you do descendants of slaves is silly.
Well, why would, but I never claimed to do that.
But if you live by the construct, you will inevitably do so.
But I'm pointing out to you that I'm not going to do that. Like,
Right, but I'm saying if you don't advocate for the same thing that I'm saying, to end the construct entirely, no justifications, no ways in which it could be used, then you will inevitably do racist things and, and perpetuate it continuing on. It's inevitable.
inevitable.
If you live by the things of division, you will divide people. It's inevitable.
But I mean, it's not obvious to me that that's the case. I mean, we live by divisions in terms of eye color,
The
hair
whole
color.
right,
But
and
we-
then
but we don't-
no,
but we
stop,
don't-
Sam. Think about what you're saying there. Have you ever been in a community that treats blue people differently than brown-eyed people?
No.
You're telling me the modeling world does not prefer blue-eyed people?
Well, I'm sorry, I've never been in the modeling agency.
Are you going to tell me that Barbies and toys don't prefer blue eyes?
No, I'm sure that no, yeah, they're definitely
Right.
some
So whenever
Eurocentric
you
standards,
do any of this, you will have the discrimination. The thing is we can't
So-
stop colors of our eyes because it's objective. We can't stop being male and female because it's objective. But as far as like gender and race, they can all be. The only way to fight them is to end the concept.
Okay. But you've already conceded that that these things aren't going to pop out of people's brains in terms of their conceptual schemes. That it's not the case that we can just snap our fingers and
Yeah,
stop
of
seeing,
course.
right?
Yeah, of course.
But you actually do think phenomenologically your experience of the world is raceless?
Yeah, in fact, it's completely irrelevant. Yeah, I mean, whatever attribution.
So that
that
okay,
you
got you. Okay. So that's different, right? Is like you see the categories, right? Like if
No, I
somebody
know.
asks you
I
that
can look
guy-
at somebody and I could say,
Yeah.
hey, some people would call this guy black, some people would call this guy white. I mean, I get that. I mean, I'm observant of the world. I understand what people's stereotypes are, but they're not accurate. Like the idea that people would say that black people have wider noses, it's just simply not true. That's the stereotype that you're talking about. If you take like Ethiopians, they don't have wide noses. I mean, it's just the thing. Anything you come up with to actually define who is black and who is white will inevitably be false.
So I'm with you there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the biological, like, there's no way to do the categories
Mm-hmm.
for them to actually map onto human beings in a correct way.
Right.
Like, I got you. It just seems to me that because, right, it would be great if we could just snap our fingers and get everyone's race concepts out of their heads.
Mm-hmm.
Then we could focus, right, if we had the means somehow, focus exclusively on the descendants of, victims of, serious, when I say like racial oppression here, I'm not trying to put people into races. I mean by racial oppression, like oppression that was the oppressor did it based on the delusion of race.
I mean, I hear what you're trying to say. It just doesn't map to reality. Even if you're talking about if you say like white people own slaves in America, it's just simply not true. Like a small fraction did. It's not things that white people did.
No, but there's a difference between. So English is kind of unfortunate in this way. When you say something like white people own slaves in America, there's one clear reading of that which is all white people own slaves in America. That's clearly false. So that would be the universal reading of white.
But then don't use a plural word. Saying white is a plural word. There were slave owners. Yep.
But so
you see the problem? There were black slave owners. There were Native American slave owners. Any other worldview besides dropping them would place those right now, Native American slave owners have additional benefits than other people, and that's gross.
So I was just trying to make a point about the language. When you say white people own slaves, there is the universal reading, but there's also the non-universal reading, right? When I say zebras zebras are in that exhibit at the zoo, I'm not saying all zebras. It's still a generic. It's still a generic use of the term, right? So there's two.
I'm not buying that. Just so you know.
It's a linguistic fact. I mean, like that.
I get what you're saying, but it's just not to say white people did this, and then to think that other people are going to know that you mean some white people. Then say some white people. That's a linguistics fact.
Like I agree that pragmatically, it's better for communication if we always specify.
It's not my responsibility to make your language clear. Like, it's on you. Communication feedback loop. You know, like, clarify your words. I get what your point is ultimately, but you're saying that, yeah, some people define these words differently. Some people define words differently all over the place. I just don't care.
You don't think there's any responsibility on the listener to be charitable?
Yeah, sure, give the benefit of the doubt, but you don't have any information as a listener to make an assumption as to what someone else means. You've got to complete the communication feedback loop.
So you think that when somebody says white people own slaves in the U.S., they actually mean to communicate the claim that all white people own slaves in the U.S.?
Yeah, they're definitely going to be saying like a Robin White idea. There are plenty that will say that, yeah, they're all culpable, therefore they're all part of it, they're all to be punished. Of course there are. There are every single worldview.
There's some people who will say that. There are some people who say that, but that's a far cry from
white
people owned slaves.
Right, but they're going to say they did it vicariously.
So no, people will say that they're all complicit in the system of racism. That is a different claim.
Right, but all of these things are possible. That's the point. Any of these people can be saying all of these different things. To think that you know what someone else is thinking is an error.
But they won't be claiming. No, there are some things that we can be pretty damn sure when we're talking to a sane person. And when somebody says white people owned slaves in the United States until the Civil War, they don't mean all white people, and you know that.
Sure. I mean, there's nobody that would assume that there's enough people that had that kind of money. I understand. But that's the vast majority are going to think that. I get that. But there are people. Have you not listened to any black nationalists? I mean, come on, man.
So I've listened to black nationalists. I don't think that
You're going to hear a wide array of opinions. That's the point. Maybe it's not 100%, but you're going to get anywhere from 99 as a point of not 100% are being complicit to all the way down to it was only the actual people to blame who were there. You're going to have that entire range. To suggest otherwise is dishonest.
No. I'm not going to suggest otherwise there. For sure, people exist on the whole spectrum of views about how much we should hate white people.
So, right, and even if you're saying white people, like, I don't know what you mean by that. If you're talking about the Jews as being white people, they didn't own black slaves here. Sorry, didn't happen. So what do you mean by white people? That's what I'm trying to say. Inevitably, your definition of white will be wrong.
So I got that.
Right,
but
so then when you say white people did that, I have no idea what you're talking about. None. I have to clarify.
But you've already agreed that for the purposes of communication, because racialized groups exist, even though races don't exist in human beings, that we kind of
You have to have a background to know this. You have to have been taught this. So of people who have been taught this, of course, they can make more generalized and accurate assumptions as to what the person believes. I can do this because I know some of the things that you're talking about. I have a common history in this. But to think that you can say this to somebody who, I don't know, lives in New Zealand, they might be like, what the hell are you talking about?
Sure, they might be.
Right.
But that's why
there's more to this world than America. I promise.
Absolutely. Right. And if we wanted to have a discussion about race, internationally, globally, then we would have to change our terms for sure.
I totally disagree. Right? That's preposterous. The people that come here, the idea is that they immediately entered into our racial system because they crossed our lines.
Well, that's all our racial system can be because it's a social construct. So race is indexed to a particular social environment.
It's not, yeah, the whole world, man. The whole world is aware of this for the most part, right?
No, but there are different, like, you can read these very fascinating testimonials from people who in Jamaica are white or are, mixed, in the US are black, because our concepts are different.
No, that's because somebody's doing that. To me, they're still nothing. Just because they
No,
experience that.
No, agreed. No, agreed.
Right.
Like, agreed. No, they're still nothing. I'm just telling you, like, how they are racialized.
No, that's only the people they interacted with. If they would have interacted with me and my friends, they would have had no idea. So they could have gone to any other country and done the same thing. It's not this. The idea that you're isolated in this is just not right.
Well, I don't actually know what you're trying to say here, because
you said we have to have a different conversation if we're talking about the way this exists globally.
Because racial ideologies vary across space and time. The United States' racial ideology.
All racial ideologies differ for each individual. You will never find two individuals in the entire planet that can even agree on the
ideology. Yeah, no, agreed. But there
are
clusters.
So you're doing
this. There are clusters.
Right. By your opinion and by what you create and your worldview and your perspective, which are equally invalid as anyone else's.
Which are shaped by the other invalid people who you grow up around.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all I'm trying to say here. Is that, yes, all these racial ideologies are false insofar as they attribute to individuals races that they belong to. They're all equally wrong in that sense. But I'm talking about, if we're going to talk about racialization, politically,
I don't understand what racialization is. What you're doing is racialization.
What am I doing?
If you're saying that you want to classify people because we still need to classify them to fix these issues that we have systemically,
I'm not claiming that. I'm entertaining that because that's Rod's position.
Sure, but then that's what that would be.
So, Rod's position is to be I don't know exactly what his view. I just think that a version of what he was saying, what it seemed to me that he was saying, was completely compatible with denying the existence of race, which is your view, is that race doesn't exist, and to say that it does exist is racist, and that's why you thought he was being racist, right? So
no, only the action. That's not why I think he's racist. I think he's racist because he advocates actions of disgrouping people and then discriminated upon them and then doesn't have the balls to even label what these groups are. I mean, let's ask you the question. Is Sean King white or black?
So, I don't know.
Why is this question so hard to answer?
Well, because I think this is actually a good example to show, the unreality of race, is because there are individuals.
Yes.
Where
it is.
Yeah, it is, because there are racially ambiguous people, and part of the ideology of, part of every racial ideology is that that everyone belongs to at least some race, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when that gets fuzzy and indeterminate, that starts to break down the whole ideology. So I agree. That's a good example as to why we should think race isn't real. But
to classify people in doing that, you are the one in power. So even if you use the race and power one, if you're classifying people against their objections, no matter who you are, you're the one with power. You're the one being the oppressor. I don't understand how you get around that.
So my point would just be, so what we want is, right, what you want here, what you would need to not condemn, say, a form of affirmative action or something, is for whatever form of classification to be objective.
Right.
And so the best we could do with someone like Sean King, the best we could do with someone like Sean King is to know how he was seen, how he was racialized.
You don't get to know how other people see him. That's the thing. I clearly see him as being white. He sees himself as being black. And then when he gets pulled over by the cops, he's going to say, I was discriminated upon because I'm black. And then the cop's going to write on his ticket that he's white. This is silly.
Yeah. So, I mean, but you can have an analysis which is like, uh, it doesn't have to be one dimensional. You don't have to just claim that in every instance of someone's life that they're racialized in the exact same way from beginning to end. You can have
No,
a
you can't have a definition where someone else is doing the labeling that's not you. It's impossible. This is why it's so silly. You can't say
what do
someone
you
else is
mean?
racialized unless you're pretending to know someone else's thoughts.
Well,
Right? So,
so
I arrested more black people than I did white people. Not because they were black, because they sold fucking drugs in front of me.
right. And so because you
I
just
mean,
told me that, because you just told me that you arrested more black people than white people, then I can get as best as possible of an access to your thoughts and how you racialized those people, how they
no,
were
you
racialized
can't.
in your interactions. Yes, yes, I totally
How?
can. Because you just told me that you saw them as black.
No, I let them write their own thing. They fill it out. They say they're black. Not me.
So you're telling me that if they didn't say that they were black on
I've
some
checked human
form,
almost my whole life. When it says race, I check other and I write down human. And that's what they should do too.
so 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 I see your like point that you're trying to make here, but the fact is that nobody in society is as committed to race eliminativism as you are. Like people are not, it's unfortunate that people aren't going through their lives consciously making sure that they're not putting people into racial boxes in the way that you like are clearly dedicated to doing. But everyone does this still because we still have these race concepts in our head.
Right, but if you
And
stop doing it today, we will have gotten one step further. One step.
that's true. That's true.
We can only I only hope that I can change 8 people, like because I'm a neo-Kantian constructivist. So I'm hoping that you change their worldviews, and then 8 becomes 16, 16 becomes 32. You know how exponential math works.
Yes, and that's great, but it's politically not a feasible program to change
Agreed.
the world.
Agreed.
So,
But we're talking about
so
philosophy here, right?
well, we're talking about
You're a
we're talking
philosopher.
we're
I'm
always
talking
talking
basic philosophy.
we're always talking philosophy. I
Sure.
mean, at the when we're talking politics, we're talking philosophy. You know,
Sure, sure. That makes sense.
we're leaving the scientific realm in most cases. We're not just making descriptive claims. We're talking about how we should do things.
Sure.
So that's philosophy. So if we want to address racial inequality that we think is unjust, right? That we think that the ways that
But
have
can I just? I need
yeah.
understanding, and I'm sorry interrupting you. But what racial inequality exists today that's unjust?
Okay, so I thought you might ask. I got a few stats written down.
Sure.
So uh, I'm sure you're familiar with the wealth gap.
Yeah.
Okay, so wealth gap, I think it's something like white households have 17 times, median white household has 17 times
It's not. I'm not sure.
median black household. Uh, so that, is largely a product of racial discriminatory policies
No, no,
from
no. Of the
early.
present.
Right,
I don't
no,
care about what happened in
so
1960. I understand.
okay, wait. So, okay, then there's going to be a problem because, well, I'm going to give you some more present ones, but the inequality that I pointed to was not present discrimination, but it was
Just the echoes
present
of the past. I understand.
inequality that is
Right.
largely,
Echoes,
yeah.
which I explain all the time. But you don't fight echoes by continuing the practice. You fight echoes by making equality for everyone.
Right.
King and Malcolm X
Exactly.
would totally agree with me. So I'm confused about who
Well,
these new black people are that are totally against anything that's been long held black nationalist, a black radical, or anything. They're way outside the realm these days to anything that was taking place in the pre-2000s.
well, so King focused a lot on emphasizing common humanity, which was crucial to the success of his activism. And I think, one of his huge virtues that completely gets ignored today by a lot of the people who champion him, is how much he focused on class, and
Yeah,
how much he
total class. Yeah, he did focus a lot more on class.
right.
Absolutely.
He had like a universal program for all. He wanted all poor people
Yep.
to live decent lives.
Do you think
And
I have any objection to that?
no,
Right.
and I love that. But towards the end of his life, he did support certain affirmative action
But why?
policies
It's
and
important to note
reparations.
why.
Right.
Very important to note why, though. The why was because he began to be afraid that he integrated his people into a burning house, and that was a racialized society that wasn't ready for what he was doing in application. That was his concern. That the data says that when blacks stayed in isolation and segregation, they were better off. That was his thing that he had to swallow because X had been telling him that the whole time.
So you think that your interpretation of the burning house passage is that, or are you basing that on something else?
It's what I've read from him. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I've read tons of his books. I've watched all of his stuff. Like I'm not gonna be able to quote out things, but I understand his general gist, and I think he was racist as well.
You think he was racist? Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I could go through his books. I have. If I run downstairs, I'll grab his book. You'll see the notes, just notes and notes and notes. Look at this racist thought. Look at this racist thought. Look at this racist thought.
Well, could you just like name one?
No, I mean I can go down and grab one for you if you want.
It's fine. It's
Yeah,
fine.
and then I'll put it in the comment section for you so you can see. But the
Okay.
idea, he's doing the same thing. He's classifying people into race, and then he'll say to treat them differently. He's thinking these things. He's thinking these things about black men. He's very. I see him doing racist things against black men.
Okay. I think a lot of where people will disagree with you on that is just that, so, right, I'm, for the purposes of this conversation, doing the whole race eliminativism thing, which I think can be defended, and it's the view that I lean toward now.
Mm-hmm.
But there are, sort of, they're not really views of reclaiming race. They're views of sort of appropriating race. So they say, well, look, biological race, the traditional race concept, is nonsense, right? Race is a social construct, but they develop a cultural theory of race, and this is what I actually heard Rod say, in the middle of y'all's, back and forth when it was clear just talking past each other at that point. But a lot of people advocate a cultural theory of race, and I think it can be defended. I lean toward the
Explain what you mean by that. Are you talking like black culture as in certain rap styles and saying nigger?
No, that's not what I mean. Well, I think, music would be a part of culture.
Right. So is Led Zeppelin culturally appropriating black blues?
So
I just need to understand these concepts.
Someone might argue that. I don't know where I stand on cultural appropriation.
Right,
Someone
so is
might
Led
argue
Zeppelin
that.
white music or black music? I mean, by definition, that's black music in a cultural definition.
But, well, I mean, it depends who you ask. I mean, people.
That's
so
what
people
I
say that
mean. You're catching on, Sam. Look at you, catch on, brother.
Culture moves quickly sometimes and slowly other times. And this is where I do think the cultural theory of race breaks down, is that inevitably whatever group of people you want to lump together under some supposed racial culture are going to be too culturally diverse to fit under one umbrella.
Yep.
So that's my view, but I can see someone arguing perhaps for a more this is actually the view that Paul Taylor defends in how he defines race, in terms of not culture, but shared history. So if everyone who's an African American descendant of slaves can, like, their individual history is such that they know that their roots go back to a certain ancestor of theirs that was brought over here by force, then all the people who share that story can count as this.
Yeah, I think that's silly too, man. It's really silly. It's a silly idea.
I mean, that's not that's not objection to it.
Right, but the objection obviously should be completely obvious. That's like, for example, by the time you even have a second generation American, they have no connection whatsoever to the past. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, especially living in Arizona, I see somebody like walk up to a Spanish person, a Mexican American, and start speaking Spanish, and they have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Because they can't speak Spanish. Yeah,
Right.
But
That's what I'm saying. There's no connection. If somebody, it's just not.
but that would be a
it's
cultural
silly.
thing, right?
Right, but
Whether you
there's no
speak the
connection to your
language-
lineage. You're not having a shared history because two people in a foreign country 200 years ago fucked. I'm sorry, that's silly.
But it's not just about whether two people fucked. It's
It
about
is.
how
I just
that
explained it.
It's about how that history shapes your
It
present.
doesn't. I just explained how
The
a
history
kid
doesn't affect the present.
No, a kid right now. So you're going to tell me that if you adopted a kid of slavery descent from freaking wherever, then that kid would be living would be limited than if you would have had a white kid? That you can't be a father to a black kid and achieve
No,
the
that's
same
not what I'm
success?
claiming. This would be a potential interesting objection to Taylor's view. Would be that, perhaps on his view, if having these parents and growing up in the household that was shaped by the history of slavery and Jim Crow, if that was
the same
necessary,
household is not the same experience, though, Sam. I mean, I have brothers and sisters who I'm 16 years apart, and I have.
I'm not claiming it's the same experience.
But I'm saying we're so close. We have our parents fucked in the same place that we all grew up in, and we have no shared common experience. Now, our great grandparents who banged somewhere in England, I have no connection to England.
Like,
It's
I
weird.
get that, and I understand.
I mean, it just
that.
doesn't map to reality at all.
Well, but I don't think that you're completely understanding it charitably here. Like,
I
he's
don't
not
want to
claiming-
understand something charitable. I'm a scientist. I understand things critically.
You can be critical and charitable.
No. That is not the job of a science. The job of every scientist is to disprove
You-
every other scientist and every fucking piece of paper they ever wrote.
One of the first rules you learn when you take a critical thinking philosophy course is the principle of charity.
That's cool. It doesn't mean it's right.
In philosophy, it's not the same thing as science. Science, the rules are clear. There's no need for charity there unless somebody's just being, fast and loose with their language.
Is a philosopher's job to prove the other philosopher wrong?
No, not necessarily.
Well, then you guys are fucking up, man. Sorry.
Well, it depends on how you conceptualize
You only learn through mistakes and
philosophy.
being wrong. So if you're not proving the past wrong, you're not advancing it.
So, I mean, I think I misinterpreted you. Let me be charitable here.
Good one.
So, yes, critical scrutiny and correcting mistakes is a crucial part of philosophy.
Yes. Because otherwise it wouldn't be scientific, and I believe it has scientific roots.
So,
or influence, let's say.
More like the other way around,
Yeah,
actually.
agreed. Totally.
Yeah.
A funny side note before we get too far, I used to shit on philosophers and say, like, how can you be a doctor of philosophy of philosophy?
And now yeah.
Now I got converted as I went. By the time I was in like my second year of my PhD, I was like, shit, it's all philosophy, isn't it?
It's exactly. Okay, so the claim I was trying to get across here. So, you said that you don't want to understand something charitably, you want to understand it critically, but you acknowledge that it's important to do both when we're doing philosophy.
If I'm talking to my friend and I'm trying to just understand what they're trying to say, but if they're making a claim, I'm going to approach any claim very harshly and with deep scrutiny.
No, you can do that while being charitable.
I get what you're saying. You mean as an attitude?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just in terms of you're not going to assume that the first criticism that pops into your head is
Sure.
is applicable.
Sure.
So when Taylor defines race as a historical construct or as a social identity for which sufficiently shared historical ancestry between individuals is like the key criterion. it does. He so for, say, American descendants of slaves who share that, racial classification, that itself doesn't give them any reason to be proud of their race, or to identify with it very strongly, right? The reason that they pragmatically do that is because that history has been particularly salient in shaping their prospects in the present, right?
And I find that that's just not accurate. It doesn't map on reality at all.
So okay, so I would love to hear how.
I mean, like I said with
Think
Rod,
that
there
about
was
that.
a percentage of descendants of slaves who became multimillionaires, and there were some of them who squandered every opportunity they had. The science is very clear that the key determiners of success in the modern world is determination and grit. It has nothing to do with anything else.
Is determination and grit are the key degrees to success? Luck doesn't play any role?
Oh, of course. I mean, luck's going to say the key ingredient that is within your purview.
Okay, but the fact that, a lot is not under your purview is relevant.
There's nothing stopping anyone in America in present day from achieving anything they want to achieve.
Except perhaps a wrongful conviction, a you know, something that lands you in jail for the rest of your life that you didn't do. I mean, there are sorts of things that can really
There's no
significantly.
policy. I understand there's
Okay,
individual
okay.
actions and there's anecdotes, but there's no policy. There's no
There's no.
widespread issue. There's no official slavery. There's no, I mean, the only discrimination that officially exists today is things that are against Asians and white people.
Okay, you're talking about some admissions
Sure.
policies, I imagine.
Things like that. There's certain things. I mean, the idea that you can pull up any police department almost in the entire country has a black FO, has a black union. You have black college things. You have black this. You have black that. You don't see that with anything else. And as much as people get tired of hearing that, the more we extend into the future, the more it grows. And it is kind of ridiculous to see it in front of everybody's faces, like it's okay.
Like it's okay for there to be, for instance, a black student union at a college campus.
Absolutely.
That's you think that's a
Do you
serious
think a
problem?
white student? You think a white student club would be okay?
Do you think that they're comparable? Do you think that
Yeah,
they're
absolutely. Because everyone's in the same boat in this country right now.
everyone's in the same boat in this country?
Right. So you would so Will Smith's kid should be able to join a black only special organization, and the poor white kid in West Virginia gets fucked. These are silly ideas and they're racist.
Michael,
Yeah.
so there this is like kind of a pattern um with your argument style is that you'll focus on one case of a very successful individual and then
It's just an extreme example to show how they're wrong. It's just like how you end up saying, like, I'll always say when somebody starts talking about other people's intent that they're being benevolent, I always try to point out that Hitler thought he had good intent. And that's sure, that's an extreme example. But the point is that
right,
even your
everyone thinks they're
demon
yeah.
thinks that this is what they're doing. So I'm sorry, but when you're thinking that there's something different between a white kid, your argument right there was, isn't there a difference between a white kid and a black kid in America today? And I'm telling you,
Well,
no.
no. That's not exactly what I said. So it, I wouldn't say that there's, that necessarily you pick any one white kid and any one black
Why?
kid.
So then explain to me, why should black people have their own special, segregated, classified by race discrimination organizations? Explain it.
So if there are average, uh, if on average some group is faring far worse than another, right? And if there are outcomes in which they fare particularly poorly, right? If there are plausible explanations of certain disparities that are, due to a kind of informal discrimination.
Can I get a direct example, not like ambiguous?
Sure. So you know that uh here's a good one. Let me I never even read my statistics. Here we go. Okay. So in 2015, 14% of illegal drug users were black in the US. 14%. 64% were white. African Americans, black Americans, were 10 times more likely to be incarcerated on drug charges. Now, that's not because of, some magical feature of their melanin. It's because black.
Oh, you're going to explain to me why police do what they do. This is interesting. Pray tell, Sam.
Right? Let's see if I get it right. Presumably, it has to do with the fact that black people, far more than white people in the United States, are concentrated in urban cities.
No.
And it doesn't at all have to do with that?
No. It has to do with proximity to violence.
Okay, sure. So, so I was a step back, but I was on the right track.
Sure, but I live in Phoenix. A black person in Phoenix is extremely unlikely to be arrested for a drug offense.
Is Phoenix urban?
It's the fourth largest city in the United States.
Okay, I guess I've never been there, so I don't know what it looks like. I was thinking of urban in terms of like densely populated.
It's first 4.5 million people here.
Okay, cool. So I'll look like.
But it depends where you are, because it depends. There's not a lot of violence in Phoenix because Phoenix doesn't have lead poisoning.
Okay, so proximity to violence, then sure. Yep. Black people are closer to violence.
Exactly. So now explain to me
police
why.
Patrol there more often.
What violence are they closer to? Whose violence? White people's violence?
Well, I thought we weren't.
I'm asking. No, I'm just asking. By the worldview, for playing into the worldview, is this white people or is this white violence or black violence?
It's going to be mostly black and Latino violence, I think.
No.
Mostly
not to a black person.
First, yeah.
Over 90%. So the minimal 92%. 92% of this violence that they're subject to is from other black people. So yes, the police respond to violence, and in that, innocent people who are in the proximity of violence get caught up in radically disproportional amounts of criminalization for anything, not just drugs, jaywalking, domestic,
they just interact
anything.
with the cops more. They get harassed by the cops more.
Yes, but it's the black people ordering this. It's an inter-community thing. This is not from the outside. So a black city is sending black cops.
One second.
Yeah.
Because here, the way that you're describing this is extremely, extremely reminiscent of the very racialization that you demonize and hate so much. You're claiming that this is a black city, that black people are ordering this, even though many black people, right? Because the way you said black people would suggest all black people in the city, according to your logic.
Yeah, I mean, you're a group, you're a city, you're writing the policies. You definitely get grouped all in together, yeah, in that condition, sure.
But what I'm saying is there are many black people there, just like there are many white people in the U.S. who didn't own slaves.
Right, but the majority is telling the police to do this. This is not something that's objectionable.
The majority? You think the majority of black people are violent?
No. The majority of black people in urban environments are the ones requesting, supporting, and asking the police to come commit these actions. It's not from the outside.
Okay. But
this is literally an entirely black problem that there's discrimination within drug offense arrests. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It's an entirely the urban environment in a city, dense population, like you say, in those neighborhoods. Now, of course, that happens with white people in the same situation. Yeah, of course it does. It's just not as common right now. That's an echo that these neighborhoods are clustered together. That's an echo.
So here's a good example of where it seems to me that you might be sympathetic, given the way that you're talking about, how this would need to be addressed, to focusing on race in order to address the racial problem.
Not at all. I think everyone that is subjected to a proximity of violence should be treated the same way. The objective measurement is the proximity to violence.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So that does make it sound better in my head because the way that
but it's wrong that these neighborhoods exist that way. That's wrong. This is a history of lead poisoning, a history of redlining. All of that's terrible. Yes.
So there's as you said, there's no policy discriminating against these people, making these people worse off on average compared to every other racialized group.
It's not their fault they're there, but they're the only ones that can get themselves out.
So my point just being, might it make sense then if there's a group, racialized group, who is subject to far more
No, never.
negative experiences of a
Nope.
certain type,
Nope.
harassment by the police,
Nope.
non-lethal force by the police.
Nope, because they're not getting harassed by the police because they're black. It's not happening. There's no evidence for this.
But it doesn't matter whether it's because they're black or not.
Of course it does.
Because no,
if they're
no,
being,
really
if you want to treat them different, if you're saying that we need to make up for them being treated differently because they're black, then therefore we need to treat them differently because they're black. You understand that's what you're saying, right?
So
they weren't treating differently because they were black. They were treated differently because in modern times because of their proximity to violence and what the community asked them to do. What the community pays for cops to do.
How about this though? So all the black people I know who have grown up in wealthy communities have still been pulled over, whether on foot or in the vehicle, incredibly more times than I ever have in my life. I've been pulled over once in my life.
You need to pull objective data to say this really matters. So you have to rule things out. Is your friend or all your black friends just shitty drivers? I don't know. Maybe. Do they live in white? Are they walking around entirely different?
Data on this because there's a big meta-analysis that came out in May, I think it was, and they found a pretty clever way of doing a control. Was they looked at the number on a certain highway. They looked at the number of people pulled over by race when it was light outside and when it was dark outside.
Who determined the race?
You can look at the study.
I know how they did it. They went by the officer's reports. So a police officer, you are going by data that said a police officer labeled somebody and checked a box on a report, just so you know.
Gotcha. And that
a white officer, a black officer, who knows? Somebody else labeled them. So Sean King would be white in this study.
Which is fine by me.
Right, so you're not actually measuring people who call themselves black. You see, it instantly falls apart.
No, it doesn't instantly fall apart because the only thing that
matters
matters
because those aren't people that self-identify as black.
It doesn't. Who cares what they self-identify? I don't care what Rachel Dolezal says when she gets pulled over by the cops. Like, I really don't fucking care. Okay. When we're talking about racialization, we're talking about a perception of someone imposed by the outside. That's what racialization is.
If you say so.
Because I don't care what anyone self-identifies. What matters to how you are treated by other people in the world. I mean, to some extent, how you self-identify with your close friends and when you talk about things will matter. But out there in the world with the strangers and the cops, it's about how they see you.
Right. Not an objective measurement. How
millions
of individuals with entirely different definitions of race got you this data. But just so you know, right from the get-go.
Definitions, yeah, sure. But not presumably very radically different conceptions of people according to three categories.
Again, you're pretending to know that which you do not know. When police
I'm not pretending to know.
You are, because you don't know how the ticket goes.
I said presumably.
Well, why would you make that assumption? Why are you saying that? Just ask me. I spent a decade as a cop. Just ask.
We have to analyze the data.
Right, and I'm telling you how the data's collected. You don't know.
Yeah, no, you just told me, and I didn't think it was collected.
So we have a ticket. We have a ticket book, right? So every single place in this entire country, some places are going to do different things. Some places are going to say to do this. Some people are going to like not have racial boxes on it until they make a law. Some places are going to have something like in Baltimore where it says number 1 is black, number 2 is white, number 3 is Asian, and cops will do things like just check any block. You don't understand what the environment is like, where this data is coming from. The people collecting the data give zero fucks about the data that you're analyzing.
I mean,
anything that's not a murder rate that comes from the police is just believing the police.
Just believing the police. I mean, I'll send you the study.
I'll rip it apart for you. I'm sure it's shit.
Go ahead.
I can tell you right now. I mean, I've been in the sciences in this field. It's all this stuff is shit data because they're defining race in their own unique ways that don't comport to what is happening in reality.
So what do you suggest someone who wants
a cop doesn't pull somebody over because they're black. I'm sorry. It doesn't happen. It's hard to tell.
So what do you suggest we do to understand then? Just because, like you said, the data itself is all coming from the cops, well, then the only other option is to listen to the cops, and that's the same problem.
Yeah, of course. So that's the thing, is you have to drop the concept. You can end up with people in the proximity of violence, people who are in a certain economic level, people who have objective measurements. You're going to find that the objective measurements map to reality way more accurately than the social constructs.
Sure, but
Black people are not getting pulled over because they're black. It's not happening.
one of the objective measurements presumably will be, in a society where people racialize each other, one of the objective measurements, it seems to me, ought to be, if we want to have a full and accurate assessment of what is the case, one of those objective one of those objective forms of analysis, one of those objective variables we'll need to focus on is how the officers are racializing, perceiving the race of the people that they're interacting with.
And it's as varied as the individual. It's pointless.
So you don't think that there's any continuity in
No,
American
as I explained in that conversation with Rod, if there's anything that you can see in the data, black cops are more violent against black suspects, white cops are more violent against white suspects. If you want to live in a racialized society and you want to go by those measurements, then that's the truth.
But I'm not. So I'm not one of the people who wants to focus on individual instances of, police violence and what race the cop was.
But now you're making a black cop arresting a black person be an act of racism, and it makes no sense.
No. Not an act of racism. Not an act of racism. But a data point in what can be described as a larger trend of racial inequality.
Right, and those things were present in the past. There's no data saying that right now. All the data says the exact opposite. As I've just demonstrated, and I posted on the Twitter thread, anyone go to my Medium page, look up the sickening truth behind state violence, the numbers behind it, the article I wrote on Medium, and you will see black people are 16 times less likely to be killed by police. If you want to live in a racialized society,
less likely to be killed by police, yes. According to than whom?
Than anyone else.
Than anyone else?
Yeah, everybody else together. Take all the other groups, take them together.
How are we breaking it down though? Is it terms of overall percentage of the population and just who gets killed, or what? Or is it?
I mean, I'll explain it to you.
You're talking about proximity to violence?
No, all black people. Take the whole generalization. That's what you were saying. Generalization. I'm telling you the generalization numbers. So the simple fact is black people commit 53% of the murders. So that's violence. Police respond to violence. So black people should be 53% of the killings, but they're not.
Wait. That is a leap. That is a leap.
It is not a leap whatsoever.
Yeah, it is, because what percentage of the population commits the crime of murders? I don't see at all why there would necessarily be a direct correlation between that and what percentage of people get killed by the cops, because committing
police
a murder,
respond to violence. I just explained that.
No, I know that they do that, but right. in a murder.
So who's being most violent should have the times that the police respond.
That sounds to me like a very simplistic way to think about this, because 53% of the murders, it could be the case. Presumably, it is the case that when they're caught, it's not in the act or anything like that. It's way later. They
Why are you saying that? You don't know that.
How many attempted murders are stopped in the act by police? What percentage would you say?
I mean, I wouldn't say they're stopped, but the suspect is apprehended or identified at the scene or quickly thereafter. Of cases where you ever have a suspect, at least half.
At least half.
You're vastly more likely to. Have you ever heard the concept of the first 48?
I'm not sure.
Say there's a TV show based around the entire thing with homicides. So if you don't identify the suspect and have good evidence within 48 hours, the odds of you solving your case are pretty much gone. So it's almost the only way that things are caught is immediately.
Yeah, but immediately after is not what I was asking about. I was asking how many murders get prevented by police.
That's almost an impossible thing to prevent, and it's an impossible thing.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's impossible, right? So this is one reason when
I don't
people
understand
say
the
like
connection. Police respond to violence. The people who are being violent should have the percentage of their violence should be the number that they're engaging with the police.
What?
I don't know how you possibly
there's so
argue
many
against
assumptions built into that. You have
What's
to
the
assume,
assumption? Give me the first assumption.
You have to assume that so the only people being killed by police are people who are convicted.
No, again, we're talking about generalizations. We're not talking about only. We're talking about
this is not how you do statistics, though. Like
it absolutely is.
That is that you go, okay, let me find out how likely someone is to be killed by the police.
Not an individual,
First,
a group.
A group. And then I just say black people commit this percentage of murders, even though it's a very small percentage of that group who's actually doing the committing of the murders.
So what? This has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
So what? How are you doing these statistics?
Because they are in black areas. So it's obviously. Do you want an answer, Sam?
Go ahead.
Okay. The numbers are very simple. Police respond to violence. When violence occurs, they're in those areas taking enforcement actions, right? And then they're trying to do preventive things. They're doing things called like running trains and jumping out on people and setting up investigations, and they're locking people up for minor offenses. They're trying all these little bullcrap tactics in those areas. So this is because of the proximity and violence. That's who's interacting with the police. So that is your basis of numbers. It is not demographics. Police do not respond to demographics. They respond to violence. And if you commit 53% of violence, then you should be somewhere around 53% of the things of the police engaging you. It's obvious.
Don't you see the problem, though?
No.
They commit more than 53% of violent crime.
I only go by murder. I told you this. No, pay attention to what I'm talking about. Anything that's not murder and a dead body is nothing but a cop's reporting. Crime is a measurement of police activity, not citizen activity.
So
the only thing you have is murder. The only thing you have is bodies. That's the only thing you can objectively measure when it comes to policing and to killings and crime in this country. Everything else is a false data point.
Then I don't understand why so many of the people killed by police were never charged with murder.
So many of the people killed by police were never charged with murder.
They were never murder suspects in the first place.
Yeah, they're murder suspects to the cop.
No, then.
Yes, they are. The cop is legally acting in self-defense of himself or others. That's.
Yes, I know.
But as a prerequisite, the police, the crime is the life of the officer. It's an attempted murder on the officer. Absolutely.
So that's what they'll say, right? But you're not calculating those perceptions of the officers in your overall number of how many people are convicted.
Yes, I am. The officer's perception is that they are less likely to kill a black person. They take it into mind and they racialize them and take less force. Less.
Okay. I mean, there are people who have studied this very seriously.
Nobody like me. So go ahead and call their names because they ain't done shit like me and they'll never battle it.
Okay, I mean,
I've been doing this for a long time.
I would really like to see you in discussion with talking about your statistical methods with Roland Fryer.
Go ahead, go appeal to this authority and tell them to do it. But you need to find a problem with it. What I'm telling you is 100% accurate. 53% of the violence. Police respond to violence. So therefore, the only correlation that you have is that
police... But it's not 53% of the violence. It's 53% of convicted murders you're talking about.
No, even if you can infer all this stuff. I don't know why you can't infer these generalizations and you're getting stuck on it.
You
So
can
if
simply infer
of
that
course I can. When 92% of black victims have black suspects for killing them, then I can generalize any black killing to 92%.
yeah, okay, I got that. I got that.
The
But
odds
you're
of a
saying
black person being killed by another black person when they're killed is 92%. That's a
the
vast
odds of
generalization, and to
no,
argue with it is stupid.
no, I'm not arguing with that. I'm not arguing with that. I'm arguing with your claim that because black people commit 53% of murders,
You know, they should
that
be in the ballpark of being 53% of police violence because police respond to violence. Instead, they're vastly less than that. It's
how
literally a
many
version of, if you're going to say racial discrimination in policing exists, it exists pro-black and against everyone else.
dude, I'm not trying. I'm not making any claims about what how racist the cops are right now. I'm not making any of those claims right now. I'm just trying to scrutinize your statistical method here because there are so many people who are killed by the cops where there's no murder. I get that you said the cops
Single digits.
perceive.
Single digits. If you're talking about somebody like George Floyd or Mike Brown or Freddie Gray, that's why there's so few of those names. It almost never happens. Statistically, it's zero.
It's not zero. It's small.
Statistically, it's zero that somebody who went after the police weren't fitting the legal parameters for being killed by police. It's statistically zero.
All right. I mean, I really don't see us making progress on this talking
Dude,
point.
you have over 1,000 police killings per year. So just 5 years ago, there was 1,500 police killings. 1,500. That's it. Most people think it's over than that. Most people in a recent study, you can pull it up right now.
No, I saw.
Think that
Yeah,
1,000 black people have been killed by the police, and that's preposterous.
year.
There's only
wrong.
right now it's about 13 unarmed black people, and only a fraction of those, single digits, is probably less than that. You're probably talking 4 to 5 people a year who are killed innocently. Those are crimes. Yep.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to debate that that the media has spun a narrative and that most Americans are uneducated about the reality of how many black Americans are killed.
But you said many, and it's single digits per year.
I wasn't talking
single
about
digits
black,
with
I wasn't
millions
talking about black people.
It doesn't matter.
wasn't.
Then we can go up to 26. So it was 26 last year of everybody.
I wasn't just talking about unarmed people.
Well, if you're armed and you're being engaged by the police, you're going to be legally fucked. Sorry.
No, I got that.
Yeah,
But
I mean you're never going to be able to say that they're innocent. If you're armed and you're engaged with the police, that's going to be a losing battle.
But they're not counted in the 53 in the overall portion of where you get that 53% figure.
Yes, I'm
because
counting
they're never charged
everybody.
with murder. They're not charged with murder.
You don't have to be charged. If there are 100 black bodies laying on the street, I can infer that 92 of them were killed by black people.
That's it. Okay. I'm not. I really see no progress on this point.
I don't understand how you're struggling with that.
I've you just watch it back.
Just explain to me just tell me what I need to clarify.
I already have. Like, that's why I feel like we're not making any progress. Is that I've said it.
I feel like you're giving up.
Which is
so
okay.
No,
I'm not. I'm not giving up. I know I am giving up on this point because I think that there's clearly we're not getting through to each other.
I'm not understanding what your objection is. I would like to understand what your objection is.
I get that. I'm telling you, I really have no interest on discussing this particular point any longer. I feel like I've made my point clear. People will see what I was pushing back against.
Okay.
So I mean, it seems to me that the fundamental disagreement between you and so I mean, I would like to return to the whole point, because many times when Rod was trying to describe how his family's past has impacted his present and how him and his ancestors being racialized in the United States as black, being an American descendant of slaves, and his ancestors, right, his family before him living through certain policies meant that they didn't get certain benefits that white Americans got
Okay.
around at the same time.
So what?
And that meant that his family did not have the kinds of financial resources that a white family from the
No,
same
don't you
time.
can't say that. You can't say that. If a white person was living in the same neighborhood with the same conditions, it would be exactly the same.
That's not true. So
There's nothing going on in this country. There's zero evidence that
if it was
being
the
black or
same
white
neighborhood,
limits your
no, sorry,
opportunity.
sorry, sorry. If it was the same neighborhood, yes,
Sure.
but
So it's not
but
because he's
back in the
black.
day, there were no same neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods were segregated.
So what? Those segregated neighborhoods were doing better.
Okay, it doesn't matter whether they were doing better
Yeah, you're
compared to
using a
now.
data point for when it was better. That doesn't. It won't comport with your worldview.
So that's like arguing that because nowadays, we're better off than people were in the Stone Ages, the Holocaust is irrelevant because now we're all better off than we were
It's
back then.
absolutely irrelevant for the life of any Jew being born in America. Completely irrelevant.
The Holocaust is the fact that the Holocaust happened and the anti-Semitism that motivated it and spread because of the Holocaust does not impact any Jew living today.
It doesn't stop the limit their opportunities in America whatsoever.
Whatsoever. So if they
Yeah,
just
you can make
happen,
a like other people don't like you. I mean, I don't like people. I don't like dudes that have long hair. I think it's bitchy. There you go. How about that? Does my opinion of you matter?
if you happen to get into office and start to uh, push this rhetoric, and then hate crimes start to happen against dudes with long hair, then yeah, I might argue that that was relevant.
That because it's present day. But okay, that's fine. I'm just talking about how opinions don't matter. If I just have an opinion about somebody, if I don't like black people and I do nothing against them, my opinion would be irrelevant.
But
So you're pointing out that people
no,
have opinions. I don't fucking
no,
care.
no,
That's
no, 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 no,
stupid.
no,
Of
no, no,
course
no, no,
people
no,
have
no, no, no.
opinions.
That's not what I'm pointing out. I'm pointing
Okay, then
out
point out something clear.
that opinions shape policy.
False.
Opinions don't shape policy. The
They
people
don't
enact
shape it, they
policy.
contribute to it.
That's what. Okay, sorry. Semantic difference. They contribute to policy.
Sure, but almost everything is going to contribute in some way, shape, or form.
Not everything.
Sure. I mean, racism would arguably have spawned the welfare state. How about that?
So I'm, you know, racism. The welfare state is not itself a policy. I'm talking about particular things, such as, you familiar with the what is it called? The GI Bill after World War II.
Sure. Yeah.
So that gave huge financial resources and incentives to cheap mortgages
Yeah, I'm a
to
veteran. I get
to
you.
white veterans, right? But not to veterans of color.
But what
They
happens?
didn't.
What has happened since 1967?
So one thing that would have happened is Rod being born. So since 1967, right? Say Rod's dad fought in the war, right? I don't know the particulars, but I mean, there's enough of these policies that you can trace certain things, not as an absolute matter of fact, but you
Sure,
can.
man. People have hurdles, bro, but so does everyone else.
Everyone has hurdles. Not everyone's
Yes.
hurdles are the same
If you're
size.
a white kid growing up
Not
in
everyone
Baltimore
has
in the
shoes
hood, it's
on.
harder for you to be white than black. There's black privilege.
Okay, I'm not denying. Okay, I'm not denying
But
that.
these
I'm not.
things apply to everyone. You can't point something out. I really think that underneath the surface, your idea is racist. I really do. And it sounds bad, but you're saying that because he had challenges, that he couldn't just overcome them. Of course he
No,
can.
that's not what I'm claiming.
Well,
That
then
is
who
not
gives
what
a
I'm claiming.
fuck?
What? Who gives a fuck?
If you can't
Because
overcome the challenges of the past, if you have every ability to overcome the challenges of the past, why are you dwelling on them? It makes no sense.
dude, so people are not, as you've acknowledged, people are not purely rational wills floating through a Kantian universe. People are embodied social beings. There are social forces that influence how we act, and sometimes there are obstacles put in place by other people that, if not block us from doing certain things, make it harder for us to do certain things. And sometimes we get lucky enough to overcome those, and other times we don't. And so,
Again, I understand that there's luck involved, but determination and grit. You can do the research. Anyone else can pull it up and look and
I
see.
got that. But
Right.
if, as long as you can see that luck matters, then the fact that, racist policies that put certain obstacles in place, even if they did not prevent any
I'm
single
sorry. This
person,
is just it's
absolutely.
just so mind numbing that what you're promoting is racial policies in response to race. You're literally, you and Rod are both argue that there's a justification for using racism to fix racism. It makes no sense.
Well,
Right, so you're advocating to group people by races and treat them differently because of things that happened in past and blame race instead of all the millions of other variables that are out there.
no, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm trying to help you see how there's a more charitable view of
I don't
Rod's.
take racism in any charitable view.
Okay.
I'm just not going to. I mean, you can say I'm wrong for that.
There's a version of Rod, what Rod is proposing, that is not racist.
Explain.
It's based on the historical suffering and oppression of racialized groups, which you admitted exist, not races.
How do you determine these groups and what timeline do you draw the distinction?
That is going to be the hardest question for us to answer.
It's
And
impossible.
no, so you're claiming a priori that it's impossible? Okay,
Absolutely.
fine. Okay, fine. But as long as you acknowledge that in principle his view is completely understandable and is not necessarily a racist one.
Which
and
view? Help me explain that.
And if we can find the means of identifying historical oppression based on racialized group rather than race, because race doesn't exist, and we can then
What do you mean by oppression? See, the thing is whenever you define these terms, you eventually have to hit something objective, like the mortgages, right? So like getting mortgages back with redlining.
What do you mean? When you define oppression, you have to hit something? No, we're going to have a theory of oppression, and a theory of oppression is not something that we can all agree on. It's
right.
So
That's all pointless and silly.
It's about. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not pointless and silly. It's the most important thing that there is. It's politics.
No, what I'm trying to say is you have to point to something, right? Somebody is not just oppressed because they claim to be oppressed. What is the oppression? Like if you're punched in the face, the oppression is getting punched in the face. There's an action. So the actions are objective. So you only focus on the actions. Otherwise, you're being racist, 100%.
That's fine. But there are plenty of actions that we can focus on, like being barred from collecting a benefit that people other than you are allowed to collect based on their race.
It no longer exists.
We're talking about historical oppression here.
No, I don't. Was there oppression in the past? Absolutely. We are talking about modern America and what we should do today. I don't give a fuck about 1967. Why does everyone do that?
So, because you have to draw lines somewhere.
No, all that time is just irrelevant. What is happening today? What objective things are standing in people's ways today? Fight those things. It ain't rocket science.
If you want to be consistent, really consistent, all racial oppressions in the past.
Maybe.
Because as soon as you acknowledge it, it's the past.
I mean, I guess I totally disagree with you. I mean, if there's
draw a line,
you're just wrong. You're wrong, Sam. If there's a policy that says the GI Bill policy you're just talking about that currently existed, it would exist in the past and the present constantly.
So, did you know about? So during the 2008.
Just going to totally skip that point that what you said was false.
No.
That's cool.
that what I said was false.
It's not
No.
technically always in the past. If there's a policy, it's always in the present.
What my point being, as soon as you go to acknowledge it, if it already happened, it's in the past now, unless you're going to have a window of the present where
The policy is always the present.
if somebody just discriminated against me based on my race and then I try to go complain, you can go tell me that it was in the past because it's not happening anymore. They already discriminated against me.
I guess
here.
if you want to say
It's
it
a
that way.
technical point.
But we're talking about things that no longer apply to anyone since their birth, dude. It's not the same. It's like saying that if somebody was racial towards your father and you're suffering the repercussions, somebody called your father a funny long-haired white guy and you're just suffering the discrimination today. That's what you're claiming.
So a 2001 subprime lender, New Century Mortgage, made 10 times as many loans, subprime loans, to black applicants.
Why? Go ahead and pretend to know that which you do not know again.
As the prime lending company that owned it.
Why?
Go read the study. I don't have...
No, the question is, why did they do this? It was a federal mandate. They were ordered by the federal government to do so. Because of policies like you're trying to institute that were anti-racist. Black people...
If they were ordered to do that...
Hey, can you let me finish?
Dude,
everybody's always telling me not to speak up.
That's what you're against here, man. Go ahead.
Okay, so the federal government, I am against it, but the federal government is the one that did that through policies that was an anti-racist policy, and now you guys are using it as evidence for racism. This is exactly what I'm talking about.
So
it's just like the crime bill. It's just the Civil Rights Act trying to be taken down in California. When we sit here and we talk, the left and people like Rod and people like you will criticize, for instance, Joe Biden for signing the crime bill that he signed. What was that? I can't remember what year. 1997, 94 crime bill. But the thing is he was listening to all the black leaders and it was supposed to be an anti-racist policy. But you can't be anti-racist. It's racist.
Well, I mean, it was a colorblind policy.
No, it wasn't.
In word, in name.
No, it wasn't.
Letter.
No, the subprime thing was not. It was definitely directly colored.
The Joe Biden one.
Yeah, sure, that was colorblind in principle, but he was listening to black police reformists. He was listening to the people, the same, like the movement now.
That's an admission. That's an admission that a policy can be colorblind in principle and still have racially systemic.
Total agreement.
It can be an example of systemic racism.
Outcomes. It can have racist outcomes. Absolutely.
So how are you so confident that that's not happening at all today?
Because there's no policy that is doing that directly. We'd have to look at the outcomes. And ask a question.
But there are outcomes. Here's one.
There are, in a world that continues to live by racist categorization, there will continue to be things that at least look like racist outcomes. Yep.
Well, so then here's at least one place where you've contradicted yourself.
Okay.
Is that you claim that there are no racist policies holding anyone back. And so if you want to, if today.
There are no policies with direct or racist intent.
Yeah, but that doesn't fucking matter.
They're illegal.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I get that, but that doesn't
matter. And once you prove
a
racial outcome disparity, the policy will also supposed to become illegal. Unless, of course, you're a Harvard student.
Wait. If you prove that a policy has racist outcomes, then it will it will be considered illegal.
It violates the 1967 Civil Rights Act. 64 Civil Rights Act. Absolutely.
No, it doesn't.
Sure it does.
Well, I mean, racist outcomes, how are you defining that?
I mean, you just defined one with the mortgage thing. That's why it became illegal. I mean, you literally just gave an example.
So that would be one where it has to be like that they found out that these people are discriminating based on race. But there are ones where there's no discrimination based on race happening. And yet
you can have a racially disparate outcome that has no intentional division, of course.
Right. And that would be a racist outcome to you?
Yeah, it would be a racist outcome.
It would be a racist outcome.
A racist outcome doesn't mean it's a racist policy. So police can have a racist outcome, but it doesn't mean they're being racist.
Okay. Interesting. But for some reason, all that matters when you say there's nothing holding anyone back, all you mean is the fact that there are no policies that have racist intent?
There's a mechanism for anyone to achieve anything on an absolutely legal and equal playing field right now.
Absolutely.
If it's not, it's illegal. So what else are you going to do? I mean, can you make it more illegal? I mean, what do you want to do?
you're presupposing that we live in a perfect meritocracy, and that's just not the case.
I'm not supposing. I'm not. I would adamantly object that we live in a meritocracy.
So then, why are you claiming that?
Because the opportunity doors are open for everyone. The doors of opportunity, equal opportunity, absolutely exists.
I mean, okay.
And it's illegal for it
to. It's very different when you say these different things.
It's illegal for any policy to discriminate, any policy, any law. It's illegal for it to discriminate on sex, gender, race. I mean, whatever, age. All of those things are illegal. What are you going to do more than make it illegal?
But the outcomes are legal. You can have racist outcomes legally.
Of course, and then you need to go back to the drawing board on your policy.
Well, a lot of people are going to disagree with you about that, unfortunately. But so,
I mean, the idea that black people, going by the construct, of course, are disproportionately arrested for like the drug offenses that you bring up before. This is something I've been screaming about for years. I mean, this is what I'm known for, talking about that stuff.
So I think that's an evil policy. So then why would you say something like, there's nothing holding anyone back racially at all in this country?
Because there's nothing legally doing it. There's no legal law. And so, are there people being held captive in their basement and can't have freedom? Of course, but those are crimes. There's no one legally being limited.
Well,
there are crimes. There are always crimes. It's like people that yell at me and say, how are you ever going to prevent all cops from doing something? I can't prevent cops from being criminals.
But you just admitted, right? You can have the racist outcomes. That's not unconstitutional, right? We should change that.
It is.
It's not unconstitutional to have racist outcomes.
Yeah, that you would go to court and you would say, look at this, and you would win. And the Supreme Court would say this policy is against the 19...
No, you would not win. You would never win that.
All right.
No, you would need them to show that they're discriminating based on that you're having.
Why did the Wells Fargo stop doing the subprime mortgage loans?
Because they found out that they were discriminating based on race, not that there was just a racist outcome.
Wrong. The policy was to discriminate based on race, to give out mortgages.
That's what I just said.
Then, when it had a racist outcome that was harmful, it was intended to have a racist outcome that was good, essentially. But once it became out and the outcome was looking bad for the people they were intending to help, it went and they got fined. Wells Fargo was fined extremely hard. They were criminal. They were penalized.
Yeah.
It's illegal what they did. And then the government came in and said, no, you can't do this, and fined them millions of dollars and forced them to restructure everything.
Disparate treatment, not the disparate outcome.
I mean, you can say that all you want, but the outcome
is...
No, you're wrong, because the disparate outcome is the only thing that brought attention.
So, I mean, that is like a conspiratorial reading of it. You can have that reading. I'm just telling you, like, in terms of, like, the Constitution...
You just demonstrated it yourself, man. You explained that when these had these outcomes, the data, you showed the data of these, and talked about the data of these policies coming out and having bad responses for the subprime mortgages. And then once everybody found out about the bad responses, it went to court and Wells Fargo lost. And it's terrible because they were ordered to do this by the government. They weren't even the real ones that did it.
Okay.
I mean, I know these situations. Like, this is what I do.
Yeah, but you keep obfuscating the point that I'm trying to emphasize here, which is that I don't understand why you would advocate this pull yourself up by your bootstraps type.
I didn't advocate that.
Well, sorry. You suggested
I said the doors are open, the doors of opportunity are open for everyone on these things such as race and stuff like that. Of class?
Even though there are racist outcomes all over the place in this country.
Of course, but these racist outcomes just aren't as solid as you think they are. Like, you got the subprime one from 2001. Cool. I mean, but these are people that entered in a contract of their own volition. And like, essentially you're saying, look, black people were too stupid you are, because these are all free. This was all free will. None of this was imposed. You're saying, you're literally taking a black person's free will, and then when it doesn't turn out the way that you think it should, then it's someone else's fault. A lot of times it's just their fucking fault. No matter who you are. Because you couldn't pay a loan that you signed and agreed to. That's nobody else's fault, really. And even today, like in Baltimore, there's no one trapped in the hood. You need like $50 and you can get out of the hood. These are choices. People have their own volition and their own rights to have self-determination and self-initiative.
$50 to get out of the hood. I think I'll call it there. To be continued. Have a nice night.
That's a weird ending.
My name is Michael Wood. Since the age of 17, I've been willing to die in service to my community. In the U.S. Marine Corps, I was Sergeant Wood.
Michael Wood spent 11 years in the Baltimore Police Department.
Michael Wood is a very honest individual. He was not liked by the Baltimore City Police because he didn't play the good old boy network game.
As my career developed, I set out to understand why people offend, instead of how they offend.
The reason why these consent decrees don't do anything is because there's no enforcement or changing of the mechanism of incentives for the officers. So all you're doing is talking about it.
I certainly was going to cross. I was ready to shoot if I had to, but I was never going to cross that line.
But you kind of wanted to shoot.
Sure.
Get what you inspect, not what you expect.
So, or anywhere that's populated, is your metric is based off of arrest. So you don't actually go out and engage with the community, because that would be time that you could be getting the arrest that you're expected to get to prove that you're a decent officer. So you actually don't have any incentive to communicate.
Michael, we should be looking for goals to not have people end up in the criminal justice system. Instead, every solution we have is to push them into the criminal justice system.
It should not be up to Jeff Sessions to determine how Baltimore Police Department operates. It should be up to the residents of Baltimore. Jeff Sessions doesn't know anything about policing, never has and never will.
I want to read a quote that you gave the Washington Post, which struck me. You said, when you work in policing, you're inundated early on with the us versus them mentality. It's ingrained in you that this is a war, and if someone isn't wearing a uniform, they're the enemy. It just becomes part of who you are, of how you do your job.
What I'm trying to say is that we are looking at people who are doing nothing new, and if we focus on the actions, then we can fix the things for next time. Because when you focus on people, we end up thinking we can chop the head off, they put a new person in and something will change. But if we don't focus on the methodologies and the institutions, then we will be
put them in a prison cell, do the paperwork, go back out and do it again. So what we really need is to change the incentives and disincentives so that no matter what the role, we're still going towards that objective that actually serves.
More occupation, more vehicles, if your answer continues to be violent, because we have to understand that everything about policing is inherently violent. I have come in there with authority and told you what you will do.